Welcome to Voices for Care. In today's episode, we delve into the challenges faced by Kathryn Babowal, a dedicated childcare operator from Sherwood Park, Alberta, who runs a French Immersion Preschool program. Kathryn shares her concerns about the $10 a day childcare program, particularly how the government's funding model threatens the high-quality care standards she has always upheld. She discusses the financial strains that are already leading to a decrease in the quality of childcare services, highlighting the critical elements at risk, such as specialized programming, inclusion of high-needs children, and qualified staff. Additionally, Kathryn addresses the implications for parental control and choice, expressing worries that the funding model will compel parents to prioritize a price tag over their child's unique needs and their family's values. Join us as we explore the realities behind the government's initiative and its on-the-floor impact upon providers and families alike. I am so excited to have Kathryn Babowal here today, who is one of my dear friends and powerhouses behind the association, and is going to kind of give her insight on what it's like for her to have been an operator, being a childcare center that has opted in to the $10 a day childcare program. Right from the beginning, you were one of the veterans like me that signed in right away. And she's going to just give some insight into what that is like in reality for her and her center and the families that choose her center. So thank you, Kathryn. Let's start with how you felt when you saw that contract, that initial agreement in 2021 or January 2022 pop into your inbox over Christmas.
Well, that's a big question.
That is a big question.
I was expecting for this to be one thing, and then the reality check came into play, I think, is how I want to answer that. All I had understood is the government's going to support for families to have some of their childcare fees paid for by this federal social program where everybody gets it without any kind of income testing. And that was going to be really great. And it's going to help for more people to get back into the workforce with a focus upon women and power to families. And I thought that was really great. And then we read the contract and I started realizing that this is looking very frightening for me. And honestly, the initial read-throughs of the contract, under pressure, we had 10 business days over Christmas break to sign it. There were no people available to counsel us. Our licensing officers were off. They were our main go-tos. The whole ministry was off for Christmas. Even trying to get my lawyer to support me to look through it, also off for Christmas. And yet we were supposed to not only read it, understand it, sign it, but then also adjust all of our fees so that on January the 1st, the numbers would have the deductions already on there for parents. Like I cried a lot of times.
Yeah.
I really, yeah. And initial read over with my accountant, she said right off the bat, this seems a little bit of concern when we're talking about allowances for increases. I'm not certain that this is going to meet the expenses that you truly have in your business. Yeah. That wasn't great, as one of the very first things that an expert reflected to me.
Yeah, no, my experience was very similar. And I think that we aren't alone. I'm sure that there's a lot of others that felt that anxiety. That was a really high anxiety time through the sector. And I think it really showed first of all, the lack of understanding coming from, the federal government, the provincial government in putting together this program and then just kind of tossing it into people's inboxes with the expectation that you have some choice, you can sign or not sign. I want to ask you, because I have constantly heard that and been told that for 3 years, I'm sure you have too, is this is always a choice. You can choose to participate in this program. You can choose to opt out of this program. Do you feel as an operator there's a choice in this?
I don't think there was any choice for the entire program, if you actually want my truth. First of all, I can reflect upon this personally as an operator. I started to see that there were cracks in this program. And if I wanted to hold back on signing into this, all parents had already heard the same promo advertising from the federal government that I had. It was all over the media. So I had to sit and weigh out, if I don't sign this, then my families are going to think what about me? It's going to turn into, you don't want affordable childcare for me and my family. That was the last thing that I wanted to have as an impression, but I couldn't see how that wasn't going to be the case. If I didn't sign, I was going to lose access not only to decreasing fees for parents, which would mean that they could go 2 blocks away to a program that offered comparable licensed programming to my own, and it would at that time decrease their fees by over $200 a month, which is a substantial number. But also, and an element that is so fine detail that it's very challenging to have explained that to parents, it would mean that I lost the top up wages for my staff, which, as a just perspective, on a monthly basis for all my staff, that number comes close to $20,000 a month that they get based upon their certification level and the number of hours that they work. They get a top up stipend wage that comes from the government.
Yeah.
So not only in order to stay viable would I need to not offer these discounts where parents could just go down the street to get the discounts, I would have to increase my current fees in order to scrape back that $20,000 that I'm going to need to keep if I want to have my staff remain attractive and incentivized to work for me.
Yeah.
It was a very frightening decision to make, but I don't think it was a decision.
No.
I think it was like, again, I'll just go back to my accountant. Her perspective was, Kathryn, if you don't sign, you're going to go bankrupt quickly.
Yeah.
If you do sign, you're going to go bankrupt slowly.
Yeah.
Those are your 2 options in this.
Yeah.
But then if you look at it from a big picture, now we have 2 years of perspective on this. I don't think that that was any different for the provinces, if you want my truth. So the federal government says we're going to be offering all of this grant money, and the provinces are given an opportunity. Again, this is their choice. Sign or not sign. Sign is going to be political suicide, isn't it?
Yeah,
of course
totally.
They all signed, whether it was great or not. And I mean, I know that our minister at the time made a very valiant effort to negotiate as best that she could in order to ensure that it was acknowledged that 70% of Alberta has got for-profit private operators as the main means of childcare contribution. But nevertheless, I mean, none of them are going to admit it to us, but I don't know that this was a great deal for anybody. And now look at us 2 years in, and we're seeing the amount of money that's going to be required from the provincial governments in order for this to be topped up to the sufficient levels needed for the actual true cost to run high quality childcare versus what it is we're getting from A and B put together. Like, it's very, very worrisome, isn't it?
Yeah, totally underfunded from the beginning, right? And I know we've had meetings with ministers. We're 4 or 5 ministers in now in children's services since this started, and I have heard from the original minister who has the one who opted us in as a province to this program, and she really believed, like all of us, this was great and it has such good intentions, and it's this program is so well intended, but I think, like us, the devil was in the details and in the inflexibility of this agreement, because it is really an all or nothing. And like you mentioned, the wage top ups and just the competition, competitive nature with offering prices and service costs and things. But the subsidies too is something, that you are really going to lose access for those families who need it the most. Those vulnerable families, the low income families, will no longer have access to those subsidy supports in your center if you remove yourself from this. So again, I think that use of the word choice is so misleading in this. And back in that time too, there was no collaboration, there was no supports for us. So I know for myself, when I was reading this through, and I'm like, there's a gag order in this contract. You can't talk to media about this or anybody about this. Am I reading this right? I had no one else to ask. I didn't know any other operators really in my area, and no one was really banded together to support each other. So I think if this rolled out now, we would have a very different discussion around it. I always ask this: if you were presented with the same contract now, would you opt in?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No. Absolutely not. The end result of what's happening now by signing in is that we're facing the possibility that there's going to be a cost control framework that's rolled out in our next contract that is going to absolutely decimate quality.
Totally.
I am very seriously considering that will be the hill that I die on if the cost control framework as we have been offered it in a draft format ends up being the true version. I don't think I can remain in integrity as an operator to my families for the promises and standards that I've made to them and also sign into that because it's going to absolutely decrease everything that I stand for what children and families deserve in childcare. I feel very ashamed that the government actually believes that this has a means to actually be possible
I know.
for it's not called quality control framework, which is where I want to just like sound the alarms. It's called cost control framework. Being told that I'm going to have a pot of money, a maximum amount for staffing, for rent, all these kind of pots. And if I go over or need to go over that number, it's going to need to come out of that tiny little $10 a day that is the 15% of my income versus the 85 that's being paid for by the governments.
Yeah.
How do you run that? It's going to just go under so quickly. I'm not prepared to go ahead and end up in a state-run cookie
No.
cutter program with a room and heat on and electricity and a box of crayons as the basis for how I run my program. I just won't. And I know that a lot of operators stand in the same position, right? They're absolutely not. They're not going to.
I think too,
Person.
this next phase that we're facing in Alberta, the cost control framework, the core and enhanced model for transforming our childcare system, really, again, while we're always well intended in these programs, the intentions for families and supporting families is there. When you don't actually engage people who know what it's like to operate a center and who work in centers and have their boots on the ground, who aren't in an office researching something that they really have no on the ground experience about, this is what happens. You create these systems with a ton of taxpayer money. I think that's important for parents to hear. You've invested in this program. You are the investors and the financers of this $10 a day program. You need to have some say in this, and there should be some quality checks along the way. Because me as a taxpayer, I want my investment back because I don't think this is actually what I was hoping for, and I don't think it's paying off. But I think that we're seeing all these unintended consequences, and quality is going to be one of them. Choice is definitely one. Something our association has really struggled with and really tried to kind of help, I guess, to bring more awareness for parents, because I'm sure you could speak a little bit on this, is the perception publicly of this program versus what parents are actually facing, what the reality is, are two totally different things.
Yeah,
Do
it's a
you
very,
feel that parents understand? Do you think that the average parent understands this program? And
no, I don't. I'll tell you why. Uh, It's been promoted as we're here to ensure that parents can choose childcare. It can be affordable for everybody. There's no need for any kind of income testing eligibility. Everybody across the whole country has access to have, should they choose, two parents contributing into the economy in order to also support themselves when it's a time of insane inflation, right? So we've got an entire country of people who are finding it hard to make ends meet. And then, ta-da, here's a program where everybody is going to get some support for childcare so that you can go back to work if that's what you need. Wonderful. And also, how do the parents who are on wait lists across Canada feel who need childcare? As taxpayers are paying for this program, but they can't access it, Crystal.
I know.
That is not good enough. It's not good enough. And there are so many people who stand in that position. I mean, the other side of this is, where is parent choice in this? Within our advocacy roles, we have been quite horrified to hear some of the ideology that's being rolled out from the federal government about all of this funding needs to be priority led towards public not-for-profit
Mhm.
programs. Okay, I get behind the why on that. The reality check where we live in Alberta is that 70% of us don't run not-for-profit programs.
Mhm.
That is not my fault. That's not your fault. The province didn't decide that they wanted to run childcare here like it is in other provinces. So as a result of that, trying to accommodate a framework that is actively, insistently pushing out and limiting, restricting the ability for majority of Alberta, at least, New Brunswick too, is a whole bunch, to actually be able to serve the parents well, it's very confusing to me. I feel like Alberta is the allowable sacrifice to Ottawa's plan, you know? And as parents, I just feel like, do you realize that? Like, this is becoming dire straits in our province with wait lists in a standard program being anywhere from 300 to 700, and I'm not exaggerating to be funny. That's really what we're looking at. And parents are not getting access. Here's the other thing as parents that I don't think that has been thought through. When this program was rolled out, the people who were in our programs, for all intents and purposes, statistically majority were higher income families because they could afford the rates
Yeah,
or any kind of subsidies came into place, right?
totally.
So let's say, for example, the grand majority of our programs, just for ease, were at maybe 75% full coming out of COVID. I think it's pretty average.
Fair,
So
yeah.
we've got 55% of our programs that aren't being used up. And then here comes the program. Well, all of the high income families immediately got those spots, immediately got that everybody gets it funding, and they all got the decreases. And then the word started getting out, and other people started saying, maybe I'll go back to work. Maybe I'll go try to find a job. So they start the job process. They go to all the interviews. They get themselves prepped. They think that this program is here.
Yeah.
But then there's only 25% of the programs that can actually accept them. So if you want my truth, the grand majority of the people that are sitting on the wait list are the low income families.
And I
And
think that's been proved. I know that we, like, speaking at the Senate level, that's been brought up multiple times. Same with parliamentary. I just have listened to a committee council meeting that was all about access, and it really, that this is excluding. This is an exclusionary program. It is excluding those low income families, and I think those are the things that no one talks about. Right? We only want to talk about the good. And I know our federal minister of children's services recently made a statement along the lines that these wait lists across the country, I mean, there's parts of Ontario, when I was researching recently, that the average wait time for an affordable childcare space is over 6 years. Like, how is that acceptable? I don't get it. But her comment in response to these wait lists and lack of access was that it shows the popularity of this program, that it actually is something to be celebrated for the success of this $10 a day program, because there's so many people that want it. And I found that was such a really difficult perspective for me to take and swallow as a parent, as an operator, as someone who actually gets to meet the faces of the people sitting on these wait lists. I mean, it would be like walking by a food bank and seeing a lineup, right? And saying, wow, this is such a token to the success of the affordability of our country. No, it's ridiculous. Like, that perspective is so out of
no,
touch.
I agree. That's like saying people are waiting 8 months for a surgery and being proud of our healthcare system working well. I don't understand it. And I can't get behind that either. I think that is very disrespectful to the parents sitting on the wait lists who can't go back to work, who are in fact quitting their jobs because there is nobody to watch their children.
And when you're sitting on a wait list, you actually, not only are you losing access, you're losing choice, because you can't get into the choice of the program you want. So now you're going to settle for whatever. You're going to take whatever there is because you're in that state of desperation. So it's just so disconnected from what I think parents were promised and what the actual needs are for families.
Yeah, so there's the priorities that end up falling into the laps of the higher and middle income families predominantly. unquestionably. Then you've got another whole piece, which is you have such an incredible privilege to access this program if you are in a city versus a country type dwelling. That there are people who are being told, yeah, drive an hour and a half one way
Yeah.
so that you can get access to the closest licensed program. And that's your choice, parents, is back to that choice question, right? A
Hmm.
choice. Or I guess you could get your neighbor to do a swap with you for childcare and you guys can do it that way. But there's no money for you there.
No.
I have some big issues with that because you know what's going on is there's priority being provided to the not-for-profit operators to expand for the spots that are needed for this accessibility issue that is a significant crisis across the whole country, right? Private operators like myself and like you prevented from expanding. We can expand, but like then the spots that we get aren't going to have the grant funding. What is the point?
Hmm.
Why would we open a program just to tell parents, yeah, there's childcare here for you, but it's not going to be decreased like everybody else's, so they won't have access. To boot, though, there's so many programs that are getting space creation grants. Like, I don't really know if parents realize how much money is being given out to incentivize for these programs to be open. So a not-for-profit is allowed to now go open a program. They'll get roughly $5,000 per spot times, let's say on average 100 spots for a daycare. So they're going to end up with $500,000 taxpayer money in order to start up a program. The private operators would invest that capital.
Yeah.
They would do that. But like we are so bad. And I'm so tired of this rhetoric. I really am. I really, really am. This decision that says, as a private operator, I mustn't have quality in my program because nothing is forcing me, like a not for profit, to invest profit back in. Do you know what's forcing me? Free market. Like, if I don't do well, and I've been doing well for 19 years, if I wasn't meeting the service demands and like tweaking and pivoting according to the needs of the community, they just don't bring their business to me and I go out of
Exactly.
business.
Exactly. Just like if
There's
your fees are not
absolutely,
set at a
yeah,
competitive market value,
yes,
people
yeah,
are not going to go to you.
a
I think
hundred
that
percent.
they're actually, by stripping away the free market, you are impacting quality. I mean, we have licensing regulations, which I think is important to recognize that we're all bound to the same standards that are supposed to be representative of quality, health, and safety. So if there is a feeling that the quality isn't there in the sector, I would ask that to go back to the government who creates these regulations that are supposed to meet those
Yeah,
standards of quality, because
yeah. The licensing officers are turning a blind eye just to the poor quality
no, no.
for-profit operators when they come out and do their licensing inspections, but it's fine. No, they're not doing that. We're all passing the same regulations and requirements for
And I think
quality check-ins.
until this program rolled out nationally in 2021, there wasn't this divide of nonprofit and for profit. It has
No.
actually totally divided the sector and created this narrative. And I think that licensing officers prior to this weren't aware of anyone's business model, which they shouldn't because it doesn't have an impact on regulations. And I know for myself, asking parents, most of them have no idea when you're choosing a childcare center, business model is probably not your number one factor. And I think that most parents don't even know the business model of the center. They're basing it on the environment, the feeling of, that environment and the caregivers and the quality and, all of those things, not on whether it's a board-led program or, someone who's invested personal funds. Like it's such a reach for me, and I'm with you. I'm so tired of it, and I think it's so unfortunate that so much time and energy and taxpayer money is going into constantly keeping this divide and rhetoric alive when we could all be sitting down figuring out how to best move forward and meet the intentions of this program. I think that we all need to go back to what we're here for, which is the children, because I think that it gets totally skipped in this program. You never hear it,
Where
right?
are the kids, right? Where's the priorities for what is best
Yeah.
for children? I feel honestly I would feel insulted as a parent right now. I don't have children that are childcare age, but I do I do feel that the federal government is absolutely just imposing a program and assuming that parents don't have the capacity for critical thinking, which, like, that is so offensive. Parents definitely have the ability to think through and see for themselves how things are going. But this divisiveness based on an ideology about quality only being available from a not-for-profit program is so entirely ridiculous. And in fact, yeah, as you know, Crystal, we've seen it here in Alberta. So the the business model was determining whether you could expand to meet waitlist needs.
Mhm.
And so one of the pieces in that the federal government is really pushing for is saying, well, we need to prevent for these big box companies that do have these huge franchises that run across the country, if not internationally. We need to prevent from this becoming like a big, I don't know, like a puppy mill with children. And
Mhm.
I'm not going to disagree to that, but the means that they seem to believe they are going through to get to that end, they are misled if they think that that's what's happening here. Because what's going on is that programs are just expanding, and instead of expanding as a for-profit business model, they are opening up a not-for-profit. They are managing with their accountants to do all the little diggy, and then they run it exactly the same. It's the exact same looking franchise with the same buildings and the same every single thing exactly the same, but now it's just under a not-for-profit umbrella. And suddenly these programs are great quality. Like, I can't even get on board with how ridiculous this logic is. Just because now they wear a not-for-profit hat, they get a thumbs up. They're doing everything right. In fact, these big companies are the ones that secured the highest grants in Alberta, aren't they? The ones that ended up with millions in taxpayer money to get this $5,000 per spot. They got the highest ones, and they are the programs that the federal government is saying we don't want them being able to profit in Canada. Well, now they're profiting and accepting so
Now
much of
we're funding
taxpayer
them, right? Now
money.
the government's funding them to open where they, I again with you, I think that childcare is something that there should be a ton of options, a ton of choices, and it is on the family to decide, not the government and not us as operators. And so I think there's a place for corporate childcare. I mean, there's a place for franchise childcare, there's a place for small operators. Everyone has a place in a free market. But I find the hypocrisy of this program, and also too all the other affordability programs rolling out. It's not just childcare. This is just a flawed kind of, I think personally, just throwing money out there to try and make people think that it's helping with the affordability crisis that we're in, and it's actually just building on it because it's never enough money to actually fix the problem, and we're just throwing a program together that isn't actually fixing anything. It's like a patchwork on a sinking ship. And I just think that this is again with the divide. Instead of fighting each other on business model and quality and these things, why are we not sitting down and trying to come up with a plan that works, that actually fulfills what we promised to parents?
You're hitting it on the head. There's no true input from the actual stakeholders.
No.
When were parents asked and when were operators asked? When were the childcare educators asked? What is it that we need? No, the government just decided. They rolled out a plan without having any of the scaffolding in place. It has just been band-aid after band-aid. In every single province, it reflects the same perspective of way too fast, no behind the scenes management, no preventative thinking, constantly rippling down onto impacts to the operators on the floor and then also the parents. I mean, we're coming up with numbers over $1,000 minimum that it is costing us yearly to be able to run this program for the government as operators. Like, that is unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. Even far more than that in a lot of other provinces as well with the inflation numbers. But the amount that we're allowed to raise the fees must be capped because otherwise we could be taking federal grant money, but it's not actually meeting the expenses that we need. Like, we're cutting out food programs. This is even before the cost control framework is being implemented here in Alberta. There's so many programs who have dropped their food service,
Mhm.
dropped their field trips, dropped their extended hours, decreasing their staff.
Yeah.
decreasing the certification of their staff. Like quality is dwindling as the belt is getting tightened, and this is only going to get worse.
I think,
But like honestly, think about this as far as the dental program is concerned. Ever consider saying to dentists, hey, your fees are capped at this amount, just sign on because we want affordability for the parents? I mean, I see that the dentists are in a pause position right now as to whether they're going to be signing into this national program because, again, there's no transparency. They haven't been provided with correct details on this, but like, think about it, would that be reasonable for a general population, just like any kind of a person in Canada, to think that the government, because they put in a social grant to support for affordability for dentists, that means that they are then allowed to have fee caps for the dentists. They're allowed to tell them what is a reasonable number for their rent or expenses for, I guess, like their equipment, their staffing. Oh, hey, by the way, also dentists, like zero profit. Okay, like can't have that anymore because federal program is rolled in. It is ridiculous when you say it out loud about dentists, but why is it not ridiculous when you say it out loud
my
about
question
childcare?
is, would you allow only nonprofit dentists to expand their practice?
Exactly.
Do those
Exactly.
exist? Probably not.
Is it even a thing?
No.
No. Yeah. But I mean, I see that they have Sun Life available to do all their admin. You know who does our admin? Right here. Who's funding for the wages of the staff to do the insane level of administration on this program? The operators coming out of our parent portion. It's so unrealistic. It's so unreasonable. And I just feel very concerned that the parents have been led to a place because of high inflation where their pocketbooks are dwindling and they need extra help. And then suddenly, ta-da, here's an affordable childcare program that you can have access to. Wonderful. Except for that means you only get to choose this exact program where there's the funding. Doesn't matter whether you wanted this program over here that offers a language, or this that does emotional regulation, or this that has a focus upon Montessori, or this that has a focus upon active kids. You're going to just choose the one now that is going to be for what you need for your finances, right?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I'm so sorry. It's really loud in the background.
No, I can't hear anything in the background, actually. You sound great.
Oh, that's so good.
I was going to ask you, I think that, operators of all kinds, when we speak out about the costs and like the burden financial, when we speak out about anything financial around our centers, I know this came up with other operators I've talked to recently. There's shame, right? There's a sense that you are somehow greedy, you're capitalizing on children. And I think it's important to put some real perspective on this. Like when you, as a program operator, when you've had to like really sit down and look at what all of the things you offer in your program. So all of the amazing things that you offer to parents and to support all those children. And you've had to sit there and decide what you're cutting. Like let's go through that from just a real personal level. Like what is that? What does that feel like? And why are you having to do that regardless of all the policy and all of the rhetoric and all that stuff? This is what's actually happening on the ground. You have people like us sitting at our desks after hours trying to figure out what you can cut next so that you can continue to support your families.
Right. Well, like in my program, I run a French Immersion Preschool Childcare that offers childcare to kindergarten families on their days off school. And how do I have a niche program where everything is in French. How do I secure for staff and attract and retain staff who need to have teacher ability and also speak and do it in French? There's not that many that do it. We're in Alberta. It's a very minority language. How am I going to move forward in that? I feel incredibly concerned about being able to keep up standards and my integrity promises for my parents when I'm not going to be able to have the numbers for those wages. So what does that look like? It's going to be like a sort of French program because I might need to hire people who don't really know French. Like that. No, I don't feel happy about that. The core and the enhanced piece is also, I just don't even understand how I'm supposed to navigate that. This is supposed to be, enhanced programming is supposed to be optional to parents, is what's coming down the pipeline with this cost control framework. So what that means is that there should be some delineated characteristics in your program that should be considered core, that should be available to everybody across the board. And then if parents would like to opt in, they can pay additional fees to have access to these enhanced service options. I don't understand how I do that in my program. The whole of my program is enhanced, Crystal. The whole thing is in French. But then I'm going to get like big reprimand warnings if I turn around and say to parents, I'm sorry, you need to pay in my program for enhanced.
Yeah.
Because it's only enhanced. I can get in big trouble for that.
Yeah.
If that's the case. But how do I reduce it down to a core program? Like, oh, we're speaking in French right now. Can you 6 kids just go in my 1-room classroom? Could you just go over unsupervised because you don't have extra adults to watch you? Just go face the corner over there and just kind of play amongst yourselves for a little bit because we're going to do the French part. But your parents didn't have availability in their budgets to invest in that part of my programming. What's it going to look like? The people who don't have the money then are now, their children are ostracized and separated out. Like, this is horrendous. Absolutely. That's why I said, if it rolls out the way that it says it's going to in our initial documentation for what the cost control looks like, I will not be in integrity to be able to sign into this.
No.
Because
I think
can't.
that, I think when we talked about if we had that agreement in our inbox today, knowing what we know now, where would we sign, would we not? I think that question is going to be what happens when we get this core and enhanced coming into our inboxes. I think that, I understand the intention behind it. There's limited funds. And it's really been advertised as a national $10 a day program or universal $10 a day program when it's an average $10 a day program. Those are two very different meanings. And, an average $10 a day program is not accessible to all families. So most parents are not going to get $10 a day. So in order to stretch the funds even further in Alberta with good intentions, we've created this core and enhanced model so that more families can have access to these affordable spots. But we have policymakers creating these programs that have never stepped foot for longer than a photo op in a daycare center. And I would invite them before implementing this, come spend a week modeling a core and enhanced program in a center and see how you can make sure it meets regulations for ratios and staffing, and see what the long-term social emotional damage that you're doing to not just the educators who are having to implement this have and have nots system, but the children who are at the front line of this, two-tiered system that's rolling out. And I think they would have a different perspective on whether it's the best choice for Alberta. But yeah, no, I think our association will be, front and center in trying to really advocate for something different, some different options.
And, honestly, on that, I hope that the other associations in Alberta that do also advocate for childcare, perhaps more so predominantly towards the livelihoods of the early childhood educators. Like, this is a massive impact. If the cost control framework is rolled out that way, then the only place where we can reduce our expenses is really staffing. I cannot go to my landlord and say, yeah, the government's only paying me this much. Can we renegotiate and you not raise my fees to inflation rates? And I can't go over to Walmart and Costco and say the same thing, government's not working out for me. I don't have enough money to meet my expenses. Can you not raise to inflation because I haven't gotten a raise to inflation? But the reality check is the key place where we can decrease to not go in the red and go bankrupt is our staff. Yeah. That is a dire, dire place for us to be in. These are people that are actually the ones who are having those meaningful interactions with the kids every single day, forming these bonds that change their lives. In daycares, there are some families who need to have their children with us for 12 hours a day. These people are crucial. And I can't give my staff raises just to have a livable wage. It's horrifying. It's horrifying to not be able to have to prioritize for the longevity and the viability of my business over being able to reward the people that make it successful. Like, it is a cycle of terrible to be in this position. It's horrifying. You know, another place where I am needing to make cuts, which just absolutely breaks my heart because I am such a strong advocate for kids getting what they need
Mm-hmm.
and being accepted exactly as they are. And the reality check is that many, many daycares are receiving children into their programming who need inclusive childcare services. There's a lot of kids who have not been diagnosed with varying things, many, many that are neurodivergent, autism and ADHD. You don't get a diagnosis for that when you're in daycare. The reality is they are not usually tested until kindergarten at the very earliest, if not grade 1.
Yeah.
In my program, I will tell you, I have, in a heartbreaking way, started to put into my contract with parents that I definitely need parents to be on board with me when
Yeah.
I say we are witnessing these concerns, which is requiring for your child to have almost consistent one-to-one support, and a need for you to please do something to help externally because I have no means to any kind of support within children's services offerings. There's no means for me to get a one-to-one support worker unless they have a diagnosis, which is 95% do not. The options that are out there are not even worth me talking about because they're
Yeah.
not even options. They don't even support in any way. So programs are footing massive amounts of expenses in order to bring staff in to work more one-on-one with these kids than we are supposed to be for ratio. And there's no help. So if the parents in my programs, I just write it. If you're not going to help me, if you're not going to accept what I'm telling you, if you are not receptive to understanding where your child is at and the needs that they are showing up with, I am going to need to give you 1 month's notice of withdrawal. This is horrifying. These children, I'm already seeing it, are being bounced from program to program to program. There's no help for them. And this is only going to get worse because we're going to have less and less money. Of course, the programs need to prioritize to keep their staff happy.
They do.
Our staff are not trained, even the level 3s, are not trained to work as one-on-one educational assistants on par with what they see in the schools when children get coded. They're not trained. They're trained to work with groups of 6 to 15 children at a time. They are not trained more than one class over the entirety of a 3-year diploma or degree program. One class that deals with all the gamut of how to support kids who need inclusivity, which also includes things like children who have physical handicaps or, they need support with feeding tubes and things like that. We're not just talking about how do you help these little kiddos that are exploding and aggressive and biting and hurting other kids. We're getting complaints as parents. We're getting complaints from our staff. And I can't pay my staff more or bring in other people to help them. So we're getting rid of the kids because we'd have no way to solve the problem. And parents should know that we are not capable of meeting the needs, even remotely, in our programs.
So the system has not kept up with the growing needs, right? Like coming out of COVID, you have children that were isolated and grew up in this very strange, not natural environment. And here they are coming into
By
childhood.
parents that were anxious, if we're being honest.
Exactly.
It's a lot of anxious kids.
We just lifted like COVID was over, and there hasn't really been a lot of support for anyone coming out of such a time of trauma and isolation. And I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but I think again, the program is so delayed in actually meeting the real-time needs of families and children that we're just seeing another unintended consequence. And when you have 400 other families on your wait list, I'm sorry, but if you're risking losing your team of staff that you need for your center because this child's needs are just too much and everyone is burning out, you're going to go back to the wait list and go for another child.
Absolutely.
It's horrible. I think, one thing to ask you before like we finish up is if you could talk to, provincial government, federal government, and they were actually listening, what would be something you'd say?
They were listening?
They are listening. They're listening. Right now they're listening.
I would actually invite them to come on the floor. Yeah. Just come live a week in the life of my staff.
Yep.
Within the money that we have accessible. Come and see what I've needed already to reduce. Come and listen to how I feel completely horrified that I have been put in a situation where I should feel ashamed in my program because I've run it as a for-profit business, and now everybody agrees that my quality is terrible, which is horrifying. It's so offensive. Come and see. Is my quality terrible? Come and see. Have my licensing inspections reflected that my quality is terrible? Have my wait lists, do they reflect that my quality is terrible?
No.
And yet that's what I live with day in and day out, is just a perspective that's over my head that I have poor quality. And come and see what it's like to try to support my staff as they're working with children who they have no training to work with. I'm literally putting my staff into positions where they are not set up for success because the needs are far too high. The numbers of children where I like to overstaff, I can't overstaff any longer, so they're even further stressed.
Yeah.
There's no means for us to really set people up for success anymore, and yet it falls on me as the operator to have to face these parents who are looking at me and saying, but you said that this is quality programming and it's going downhill and I have nothing I can do about it. Absolutely nothing. Unless, hey, I'll take out a personal loan to support my
the
business.
government program.
But that's really what it's coming down to. Okay. I would like to sit down with them and my accountant and show them, look at how much money my program is spending. And frankly, like, I invested initially into my business the way that anybody would into a Tim Hortons, for example, right? Yeah. And now I don't have any means to sell my business.
No.
Buy a business where my fees are regulated and I cannot expand and there's no means for me to increase my profit, Crystal. 0 people are going to buy my business. I have an unsellable business because I signed a contract so that parents could get affordable childcare. And I did that from very, very good intentions to support families. And I agreed with the idea being presented about the program, but the rollout of it is decimating my program. And it's horrifying to parents. They have no choice. They're losing quality left, right, and center. It's going down the toilet. But the price tag is fine if you can get a spot. There's so many pieces to this that are disappointing.
I like that answer to the question. Like I think that I would love to see some more of these policymakers come and spend a day in the life of an ECE. And I think that before that, they should have to take the base course, because we don't need to get into that, but I think just to make it a full scope of experience. But
yeah, the base course is the training, just so that other people know, the training course that the government offers for free for anybody around the world actually can take it to take and acquire their level 1 certification in childcare, which is the minimum required to work in a childcare program and to get access to the government top-up wages. It is absolutely insufficient for setting up staff for success for how to support children in this day and age for this sector. It is entirely
well-intentioned, but not meeting the actual real-time needs of families and the sector. So
well, and as it is, it would take them 4 months to take the course, because the 25-30 hours of course requires for 10 business days of marking waiting time, so they won't get it for 4 months.
I know we need a full revamp of everything, which I'm optimistic that you have another new minister step in, and hopefully, I feel like there's some wheels turning and things are moving. Hopefully, gotta hold out optimism, or it's gonna make it difficult to keep going some days, right? But
I feel hopeful for Minister Jones. He likes to do things fast. I mean, he was in for like 4 seconds before, after Minister Schultz started running for the leadership campaign, and he stepped in for that little bit, few months there, but he got stuff done in that few months. So I feel very hopeful. Him being appointed after our advocacy choices to make the government listen a little bit after our closures in January, and him being named the minister that's going to be in charge of our area for children's services now under Jet. I feel very hopeful that he has the capacity to look at this from a job perspective, which I think is wonderful. That's exactly what Alberta needs. And I think that's the most wonderful messaging that could have been offered to the whole of the country, that childcare falls under jobs in Alberta. That is a high five move. Absolutely. We care about the ECE jobs and the operators that are running these programs. I love that messaging. And I think that he comes really at a very quick business mind for the math and the numbers and the reality checks of impact of this program. I feel very, very hopeful that there's lots of opportunity for next step progress that's going to happen in Alberta, and then rolling that out into supporting for progress in other provinces to advocate for the same kind of things. If Alberta does it, then there's means for others to jump on board and say, well, Alberta got it, so what are you guys doing? And I love that. I'm available to that. Yeah.
I'm with you. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on today's journey through the heart of Canada's childcare sector. We hope you found inspiration, insight, and a call to action that resonates with you. But our conversation doesn't end here. The quest for high-quality childcare is ongoing, and your voice is essential in this collective journey. Stay connected and continue to be part of this crucial dialogue by following Voices for Care on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe to receive updates on new episodes and share with friends and family to broaden our community of advocates. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of children and families across Canada. Don't forget to reach out via our social media channels with your thoughts, stories, and ideas for future episodes. Your input helps shape our mission and the future of childcare in our country. Until next time, keep raising your voice for care, because every child deserves a bright start, and every parent is entitled to the choice and care for their family. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Voices for Care.